at the Balie to this Freedom Lecture on reporting on Gaza. My name is Zara Toxes. I'm a program editor here at the Balie and tonight's moderator. And for the last 6 years, I've been making programs on international politics and journalism. And with the Freedom Lecture, we give the stage to people who know from personal experience what it is to not to be free. And we want to share their stories, spread their message, and learn from their struggle. And in this series, the Balie has welcomed freedom fighters like the Egyptian writer and activist Nawal el-Saadawi, Ugandan activist Frank Mugisha, Hungarian journalist Veronica Monk, and Palestinian author Adania Shibli. And the Freedom Lecture is made possible by FEFONS, and we're very grateful to them. And looking at the world today and everything what happens, we cannot ignore Gaza. And in the past months, the Balie welcomed several guests to discuss the situation there, such as renowned journalist Kim Gattas, based in Beirut, who argued that in understanding the events of last year, the regional component is a key component you cannot ignore. Or the grassroots movement Standing Together, who consists of Israeli and Palestinian activists who are trying to debunk the myth that military oppression of Palestinians is needed for Jewish security. And we also invited a panel of journalists covering Ukraine and Gaza and asked them how to provide a reliable news coverage amid propaganda and censorship. And tonight, I'm very honored to welcome Amal Helles, a journalist from Khan Yunis, a city in the south of the Gaza Strip. And there she was a journalist for the local outlet White Media, and she reported from Gaza for the Times until the Hamas attack in Israel on October 7th, 2023, and the subsequent Israeli invasion of the Gaza Strip. And at the moment, Amal Helles is a Safe Haven Fellow at the Netherlands Institute for Advanced Studies, where she researches the role of women journalists in news coverage from Gaza. And we are very honored that she will give the Freedom Lecture. And thereafter, I will invite Dutch journalist Sander van Hoorn and editor-in-chief Wendelmoed Boersma to discuss Dutch media coverage of Gaza. And in the end, there will be also time for some questions from the audience. But first, Amal Helles will take you along with her story of being a journalist in Gaza and her decision to leave. Please give her a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, and honorable guests, I stand before you today not only as a journalist, but as a Palestinian, a daughter of Gaza, and a witness to the ongoing tragedy of my people. My name is Amal Helles from Palestine, a land that has borne witness to pain and hope for generations. My ancestors were forced to leave their homes in 1948 due to the Israeli attacks pushing them off their lands. Now, as I look around, I see the history that they throw is repeating itself. We are living through a new Nakba with forced displacement, that unimaginable loss, and the same longing for a homeland. I have survived over 7 wars, each one stripping away the normalcy of life. Yet, despite the darkness that surrounded us, we, the journalists of Palestine, continue our work, telling the truth, sharing our stories, and ensuring that the world doesn't forget our struggles for freedom, justice, and dignity. Before the war, life in Gaza was already very critical because of the Israeli blockade for more than 17 years, which controls Gaza by land, air, and sea. This blockade made it nearly impossible to travel or access the outside world. Basic resources like food, water, and medical supplies were limited, and electricity unreliable. With daily blackouts, people lived with few opportunities to work or build a future, and even education was often disturbed. Israel has launched frequent military operations on Gaza over the years, causing widespread destruction and loss of life. People work hard to rebuild their lives, but each time the fear of another war loomed over them. Many outside believe our suffering began on the October 7, but that is not true. The pain and the struggle have been part of our lives for years. The blockade and repeated wars have shaped our lives and taken away our basic rights, freedom, and hope for another future. Despite these challenges, we build a life filled with small moments of warmth and joy. I worked regular hours at a local media agency, and afterward, I would return home to spend time with my children and family. Our lives revolved around simple pleasures, like weekly family gatherings, sharing meals together, enjoying playful moments with the kids. These small joys were a source of comfort and happiness amidst the hardships. After years of hard work and saving, my husband and I achieved a dream that felt impossible under the circumstances. We built a home for our family. This home symbolized safety, stability, and the life we had worked so hard to create despite the limitation imposed on us. We called it our forever home, a place we could finally feel a sense of achievement and peace. I lived in my house for only 6 months before the war began. In a blink of an eye, it was destroyed into ruins. Just like all homes in Gaza, I had begun my master's study at the university, but the war broke out before I could complete it. The university, like so many other places, were destroyed, leaving my dreams and future uncertain. What I had started with hope and ambition was suddenly shattered. Both the war and the devastation that followed. Overnight, the war turned everything upside down, transforming our hopeful life into a constant struggle for survival. Just 5 days after it started, I received an offer to work for the Times of London. I went from covering daily news to witnessing one of the deadliest wars in Gaza's history. During the war, I lived in constant fear, especially when I had to leave my children behind to go to work. The fear was always there. Would I find them among the wounded or the dead? Or perhaps I wouldn't return to see them at all. I also feared for my husband, who is a journalist as well, at the risk of being targeted. During my work, my mind was constantly consumed with the worry about my children's basic needs, whether they have filtered water, food, or even the essentials to survive. I would tell them, I will bring you some biscuits. But the truth was, the shelves were empty with everything scarce. during the Israeli closure of the crossings. My husband and I struggled every day, waiting in long lines just to get a loaf of bread, water, knowing that even the simplest necessities had become a daily challenge. I will never forget the screams of a mother who had just lost her children in an Israeli airstrike. They were hungry. They were hungry. They killed them. Or the man shouting, "I have no one left." And the little boy covered with the blood and dust wandered through the hospital, searching for someone familiar, searching for his family. The scenes I witnessed in many hospitals were unimaginable. Bodies are piled up in the yard and entire families wiped out. It was incredibly hard to see the bodies of the children torn apart without imagining my own children in their places. The war in Gaza is not just a series of events or a list of numbers. It is a concealed stories of loss. My life as a war reporter started with a young girl called Fulla. She was injured in an Israeli airstrike, the only survivor of her family. She had been rescued from under the rubble. After 2 days, when she woke up, were the only words she could say, "Where is Mama?" Asking about her mother, not knowing that all her entire family have been killed by Israel. A man's heart-wrenching scream echoed through the hospital, mourning his only child, a child he had longed for 13 years to have, only to be killed in an Israeli missiles. Another woman, completely broken, bidding farewell her twin children, who were killed along with their father in an Israeli airstrike in Rafah. She kept repeating, "They are gone and took my happiness." During my coverage of displacement camps, I witnessed heartbreaking realities. Families endure harsh winters in makeshift tents, exposed to bombing, cold, malnutrition, starving, population, and diseases. On November, one day, the long-feared news came. My husband was under the rubble. He had visited a building that had partially collapsed after an Israeli airstrike. Rescue workers were working together to get the dead and injuries from under the rubble. He had entered the building to film. When the roof collapsed, 5 journalists were injured. When I read the news on my phone, I didn't know if he was still alive. I was paralyzed. I felt like I had lost everything. Fortunately, his injuries were not too bad. At the beginning of December, the Israeli issued evacuation notices for the area where we lived. We initially decided to stay. Since we were on the edge of the zone, but the night we saw the bombs lighting up the sky as they fell. Very close. I bought my degree certificates, my children's documents, and wedding photo album in a bag. Wajih, my son, he's 5, took his Spider-Man toy, and Maryam took her favorite dress. They kept asking me to take more things. Samid and I told them, don't worry, we will pack soon. I looked at the front door with a key I still carry with me. As we left, I couldn't stop crying. The journey of displacement was like a nightmare. The road that usually takes just 15 minutes from Khan Yunis to Rafah took over an hour and a half. The large crowds forcibly fleeing like us. There was only one road open, and all others were too dangerous to use. Along the way, thousands of families, children, injuries were packed in the streets, some on donkey carts, others walking on foot. Even the displaced people were not safe. Civilians were targeted as they tried to escape. I was terrified the entire time, constantly worried that we could become a target just like so many others around us. Finally, we were in Rafah, a broader town. We found shelter in a small, overcrowded house. There were 17 of us living in that small, dark basement, with no electricity, no water, and barely any food. As a journalist, my mission was not only to report stories, but to live through them every single day. In January at 10 p.m., when my children and I escaping certain death, when a series of Israeli airstrikes began, smoke, dust, debris filled the basement to the point that we thought the house we were sheltering in was the target. I collided with a meter-long metal shrapnel that had been thrown by the intense of Israeli bombing at the house next to us, which was completely destroyed, killing 11 civilians, including children, and injuring tens. I grabbed my children and rushed out the building. This area, supposed to be a safe zone, designated by Israel, with no regard for the fact that Tell Sultan, one of the most densely populated areas in Rafah, was filled with displaced families. But in that moment, despite the fear and despite the fact that my children needed me, I left them with my sister and rushed to cover the massacre. During the war, there is no time for shock, no time for grief. To do my duty, it's only the time to do my duty and document this war. After what we went through that day, I had always imagined that one day my children would become under the rubble. It was realization that made me take a hard decision. The times helped me with this process. After so many false starts, we almost gave up hope on February 19, when again our names weren't on the list of people allowed to leave. Then, at 3 a.m., we were woken up by a phone call. You are on the list. You are on the list. At the last minute, I changed my mind. I tried to stay. I told Samad we would stick it together, but he begged me to go with the kids while he stayed behind. He gave me a hug, one that I think about all the time, and we were gone. It didn't take long before I realized we didn't really have chances in Egypt. I didn't have the right to work, and the children couldn't go to school. I was granted the incredible opportunity to become a fellow at Netherlands Institute for Advanced Study. This fellowship, which provided me with the time, space, resources to focus on my work, has been a crucial turning point in my life. At NIAS, I was able to continue my research and writing in a safe and supportive environment. The fellowship has allowed me to engage deeply with my project, reflecting on the role of female journalists in Gaza during the war and the challenges they face. It has been a place where I can think, write, and connect with others who understand the power of storytelling and its role in advocating for change. When I arrived in Netherlands, I saw my children, their constant anxiety, the fear in their eyes started to fade as they began to understand what the stability feel like. They went to school for the first time after a year of absence, made new friends, felt for the first time what safety can truly mean. Being a journalist in Gaza means living dual reality, witnessing the horror while trying to document it for the world, or while being targeted yourself. Journalists in Gaza face harsh and dangerous conditions while covering Israeli crimes and violations, as they are directly targeted by the Israeli army, which has killed more than 194 journalists since October 7. In addition, their homes, offices, and equipment have been destroyed. Many have lost family members. Palestinian journalists in Gaza have paid the price to cover the war by showing and documenting the Israelis' crimes, such as Mu'min Sharafi, who lost 22 of relatives. Many journalists in Gaza live together in crowded tents, united by their pain and shared faith. They suffer from psychological burdens due to the constant fear of being targeted or killed while working. Moreover, the lack of food, water, medicine, mattresses, fuel, and internet access presents a daily challenge as they must search for connections to send media materials, which hindered the timely delivery of the message. Many people in Gaza have started to fear being close to journalists, as they may also be targeted. Israel has launched a campaign to gain against some journalists, labeling them as terrorists, using these claims as a justification for violence against them. This growing fear among the civilians adds another layer of isolation for journalists in Gaza. Despite these harsh conditions and dangers, Palestinian journalists maintain high standards of objectivity, reporting facts truthfully and integrity, fully aware that their mission is to present the true picture to the world, free of bias. They are committed to document events as they are, even amidst their personal suffering and immense losses, reflecting their bravery and high professional ethics. Many female journalists in Gaza have shown extraordinary strength and resilience, often at a great personal cost. The journalist like Noor Swerki was forced to send her children to Egypt for safety while she and her husband stayed behind in Gaza to continue their work. There is also the tragic story of Ala Khaddoura, a journalist who was killed with her family while reporting from the north of Gaza. In her final moment, she shared a heartbreaking message. Today, our dream is that if we were killed, to die as one body, so people will know us. We don't want to be shattered into pieces, placed in bag, forgotten. Shuruq al-Aila, Palestinian journalist, recently awarded the 2024 International Press Freedom Award, lost her husband, the journalist Rushdie Al-Sarraj, who was killed during an Israeli airstrike while they were having a breakfast together. After 15 days of his death, Shuruq al-Aila shared a post on Instagram, said, "We choose the name Dania for our daughter, which means close in Arabic. So she will always stay close to our hearts. Today marks her first birthday, and we had planned a big celebration, imagining the memories we would create for her. I'm devastated by the thought of how Dania will remain close to her father's heart without remembering his face. She's too young to be an orphan, and I am too young to be a widow. I was too young to lose my life simply because I was a journalist." It's important to recognize how many of Western media has shaped the way we understand the war. Unfortunately, much of the reporting had been biased, leaving out crucial context and presenting a one-sided view of the situation. These biases not only affect how the world perceives Gaza, but also hide the reality that millions of Palestinians are living every day. The reporting is always very unbalanced. Since the beginning of the war, many reports focused mainly on Israel's right to defend itself, without fully explaining the long suffering of the Palestinians in Gaza for decades. The humanitarian crisis, including the targeting of homes, hospitals, and schools, was often left out. Instead, the coverage mostly emphasized Israeli security concerns, making it seem like the war was simply about fighting, not about the ongoing suffering of millions of people in Gaza. The narrow focus distorted the truth and left out important details about the lives of those who have been living under siege for years. The main issue is that they don't see us as equal human beings with the same rights. Like, look at how much attention is given to the 102 Israeli hostages held by the resistance. Meanwhile, there is almost no mention of the 16,000 Palestinian prisoners, including 11,000 from the West Bank, 5,000 from Gaza, and 860 children. It is as if they don't see us as a human or believe we are equal as any humans in the world. That's really the problem. The international community, which has spoken for decades about democracy and human rights, is now standing by, unable or unwilling to recognize what is happening in Gaza, war crime. How can countries that claims to protect the human rights ignore the clear genocide taking place right in front of the world? This is a double standard. What Israel is doing now in Gaza, and to some extent in West Bank, and even in Lebanon and Syria, is a combination of three major war crimes. First, there is a genocide that has so far killed at least 450,000 Palestinians, including 17,000 innocent children, with 10,000 still buried under the rubble. And there are 96,000 injured people, a quarter of them of whom are likely to die because medical services have been destroyed by Israel. Secondly, there is the crime of collective punishment, which includes starving people and denying them access to food, water, electricity in an attempt to break their resilience. Finally, there is the crime of ethnic cleansing, which we can clearly see happening in the north of Gaza, like Jabalia, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia. Israel is trying to carry out ethnic cleansing, a plan they have not yet fully achieved, but they continue to try. These crimes cannot go unpunished. The silence of the world about these crimes make us question their sincerity about the human rights. Are human only applied based on politics or geography? Or do Palestinians not deserve these rights like others? I do not often mention the people that were close to me, that I have lost last year. Maybe because the memories are too painful. My lifelong friend Balsam, who had just finished packing her bags, and she was planning to flee with her family next morning. But she was not lucky. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, which was, I think, for everyone very intense to listen to, also heartbreaking, but most of all, I think, very important to hear. So thank you for that.
Actually, thank you.
It's on if you try to.
Yeah. Actually, thank you all for being here and listening to my story. But just a note that it is not only my story. There are thousands of stories that are still in Gaza, but they didn't have the opportunity or the chance to speak out. And thanks for you to give me this chance to speak out. And actually, it takes me long to prepare the speech because there's too much stories, too much thing I want to write, I want to share with you. But because we are limited with time, I choose a little bit of the things or the heartbreaking stories that occurred in Gaza since the 7th of October and before.
Thank you, and we still have some time, so if you have anything to share, you can come up with. The war changed everything, you say in your speech. You became, from a, let's say, normal journalist, a war journalist overnight. Your simple pleasures in life were taken in by fear. Can you take us along with, if you would go on a day for work, for an interview or making a report, like how can you visualize this? How can you take us with you? How did you operate?
Actually, because my life before the war was a reporter, doing ordinary reports, doing stories about Gaza, in a local company, providing services for other channels, translation and services like that. But when the war started, actually my life totally changed. Because since the war started, after 5 days of the war, I start to leave my children with my family. And then I take my equipment, my mobile or camera, and actually my husband with me also at the beginning. And then I leave my children. Actually, it was a really difficult decision. And at this time, to leave your decision in this serious situation that they are needed you. They were needed me. All the time they're begging me to stay because because sometimes they hear explosions, a target or anything. They need my hug. They need me to hold them. But actually I have my duty. I have a mission to work, to get out. So usually I get out from my home and go to hospital first, because there I can charge my phone, my laptop, my equipment, because since the war started, Israel destroyed everything, electricity, and imposed closure in all the Gaza Strip by closing all the closures and imposing cutting out the electricity, destroying the sanitation, destroying the sewage. So since the war started, we don't have power in our homes. So we have a struggle that we have to charge our phones, we have to charge our batteries. So we start going to the hospital, and the hospital full of displaced people, full of And when you want to charge your phone, it's not a simple mission. When you want to charge your battery, it's not a simple mission. So after that, I organize with the team what we are going to do. For example, if we want to go to the displacement camp, we want to do a story about the starvation, about the a family, about children. I arrange with them what we are gonna do and the questions that we are gonna do are asked to the people, and then we go to the displacement camp. But we face many difficulties. First, in movement, we don't have fuel for cars. We don't have because there is no fuel. There is no fuel for the cars to work. So sometimes it takes us hours to reach the displacement camp to do a story. And the other challenge that you are in risk all the time. At any time, you will be targeted. There is no safe place in Gaza, as you know. So, and when you are a journalist, it becomes a heavy burden in your shoulder that you are a journalist and you could be targeted at any time. So despite all these challenges, that you cannot move, you cannot move freely all the time. You are in fear and worry that you could be targeted at any time. And another thing that your worries and your fears with your family, with my children, that at any time when I trying to know the news or to receive any news, I actually all the time I'm afraid that at any time I could receive a news about my family, about my house, about any of my relatives. So all the time we are in fear, we are in worry. And other challenge is the internet. Okay, we did the story with a certain family, and when we back again to the tents of the journalists, there are tents for journalists. They are sharing their equipments, they are having internet, they're taking it from the hospital, and they are staying there and doing their job. But when we have another struggle, that the internet, we don't have a powerful internet to send materials. So maybe it takes us about hours in order to try to send materials to, for example, for the Times, or my husband to send for the NBC News. So it takes time. It takes time, and yeah.
And in your speech, and now again, you mention the importance of your duty. You know, you have to report. You say, at the same time, you're also in fear about your family, your children, yourself. You can also think, you could also be busy with leaving Gaza. Do you see this urge and also the importance of your duty also with the other journalists, that they really want to report instead of thinking, how can I leave this place?
Actually, when I mentioned the female journalists and other journalists, actually they have extraordinary strength and struggles, that they are still in the battleground, still in the front line, still doing their job. I'm really appreciated their unimaginable work and duty, that they are still doing all of that despite all the challenges, despite all the risks. Yesterday, the number of journalists who got killed, about 196. This is a horrible number that you have never imagined during our whole life. This war is really a devastating war in all aspects, especially for the journalists. And you see that sorry.
Here's some water if you...
Yeah, okay. Actually, when I try to recall the moments when we used to work into, I feel it's really heartbreaking, and because it's not suitable for anyone to live the situation that we went through. And you are a journalist, but at the same time, you have family. You have to do your job. As a mother, as a father, you have to provide water for your children. You have to provide food. You have to provide loaf of bread. So we stand long lines for everything to get bread, to get food, to get water. But despite all of that, we have a mission. We have our duty. We know if we don't do that, who will do that? And another thing, given that Israel, since the beginning of the war, banned all these Western journalists to enter Gaza. So you can find in this war, many of female journalists stepped in the front line. And on the ground, you can find many influencers, many digital creators who are continuing, who are documenting what is happening because they feel they have responsibility to speak out. They have responsibility to share all these stories for the whole world.
And at this moment, you already touched upon it. You're doing research on female journalists covering Gaza. Can you elaborate a bit on this? Like, what are your findings? And maybe also, how do you get in touch with them?
Actually, since I got this grant from NIAS, which a Safe Haven Fellowship, in order to work on my research, it gives me actually a safe place, safe environment to work and to explore, to investigate on my research, with feeling safety, with feeling that my children are with me, so I can work, I can explore, I can know more people, I can do everything. So when I start thinking about what I want to do, first, I think about the role of female journalists who are working in Gaza. I want to know how and why these journalists become prominent voices in the coverage during the war. I want to investigate about this. So I actually I did some interviews with the journalists who are in Gaza, but still I didn't finish, and I think it will take a long time, because there are many obstacles, many difficulties in contacting, in being in a direct contact with people in Gaza, because there is no connection, no stable internet, no stable connection. So sometimes you find, when I try to make a call with them to ask them questions, there's interruption. So it's really difficult to make a direct contact with them. So sometimes I tried to send them questions on WhatsApp. I tried sometime to, I remember only with one journalist, I was lucky to do a Zoom interview. The other journalist, just by texting them WhatsApp. But I feel that, no, I need to make a direct interview with them, a direct contact, but with the situation in Gaza, without internet, without power, without these facilities, I will not be able to do so. So, okay, I'm flexible in my research, so I will try as much as I can to reach more journalists. But in this situation, I feel it's really difficult to reach them in a direct contact. Actually, my motivation to this study, to this research, was since the war started, when Israel banned or banned the entry of the Western journalists to enter Gaza, many of the female journalists and many of the influencers, who are also many of the female influencers, many of the female digital creators, are stepped in the ground, and they feel that they have responsibility to share their stories, to share the human stories that are, and the things, the unimaginable stories the unimaginable situation that is in Gaza now. So, many journalists in Gaza, like Balestia Al-Aqad, like Hind Al-Khudari, like Bisan Ouda, are now become prominent voices of the coverage in Gaza, because I feel that when I start searching, when I start analyzing their posts, their the reports, I found that their proficiency in using the language and in mentioning the human story, they are trying to to trying to highlight in the human stories, in children, women, and the language. It's really helped them in reach for the international audience. And because when I asked many of the people here, they told me, yeah, we follow Bisan, for example. We follow Palestinian. I asked them, why we follow them? Yeah, because they really, they publish a live videos, how can I say it? Yeah, for the coverage in Gaza. So we trust them, and yeah, they are really powerful.
Another important topic for you is the role of Western media. Mm-hmm. Like you explained, you think it's a biased, one-sided. Did you see maybe lately a shift in this? Because you also had international journalists speaking out, for example, journalists from the BBC sending a letter to their own broadcasting Australian journalists saying to their own newspaper that they thought they were biased in covering news. Did you see a shift lately maybe in mainstream Western media in this?
Actually, when I said about the bias and the unbalanced narrative about the Palestinian narrative, okay, I said there is a bias, but not in all the Western media. I said many of Western media have really a bias toward the Israeli narrative. For example, you find that they trust the Israeli narrative without verifying, without taking care that they have to verify the resources. For example, when they are talking, when one of the channels take the statement of Netanyahu, the Prime Minister Netanyahu, about that Hamas beheaded 40 babies. They take this narrative without verifying if this narrative is right or not. But after that, they apologize and they deleted it. Another thing that they have unbalanced in narration. For example, you can find that they didn't take the whole context that the Palestinian in Gaza, they are confirming and always talking about the 7th of October, that it is the start of the suffering and the pain of Palestinian. But no, it's not the start. We were in siege for 17 years. We were under occupation for 75 years. Why they are not talking about this? Why they are start talking about the 7th of October? When I'm talking about the unbalanced narrative that they said the war between Israel and Hamas. You feel that all the Gazan, all the Palestinian are Hamas. It's unbalanced power. How they can, it's really, okay. And other thing, when they are, sorry, and other thing, when they said the Palestinians were died, and when they mentioned the Israelis were killed by Hamas.
Yeah, that's what we see behind us.
Look how the bias here and how they use the double standard in the language. Anyone here, if you read this headline and said 26 die, you feel that it's not. There is no war there. They die as a normal death, or any explosions. It's not from Israel. It's, yeah.
Maybe before I invite the other two journalists, do you expect some kind of support from journalists internationally, and how would this look like?
Actually, I want actually to send a call for all the journalists, the Western journalists, to make a solidarity with their fellows in Gaza, the journalists in Gaza Strip, to support them, to talk about their stories, to mention them all the time. Not only we are not a statistic, we are not number. You have to mention their stories. Everyone on these journalists have a life, have children, have a family, have a history. So you cannot only talk. talk about us as a statistic or as a number. And another thing, I want them really to verify their resources and take our resources in their consideration. They don't take our resources as a reliable or as something faithful that they can trust it. They don't trust our resources. They feel that we are not objective. We are, in our reports, we don't have objectivity. We don't have integrity. We don't have, why? Why? Just because we are Palestinian. So they have, the Western journalists, they have to take in their consideration that we, the Palestinians, are truthful and faithful, and we have integrity, we have a credibility, and they have to trust us, to trust our resources, and stop talking about us that there is no journalist in Gaza because we are Palestinian. Stop talking about that. Stop. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very clear message and the call. I want to thank you for now. We'll come back to you in the end. I will invite the next speakers with whom we'll talk about the Dutch context. And you said you prefer to listen because you did not know so much about the Dutch context, but in the end, we will come back to you for a response. So for now, you can take place at the front row. And I want to invite the next speakers to join me on stage. Please, Wendel Moet-Boersema and Sander van Hoorn, give them a warm welcome. And let me introduce you properly. Wendel Moet-Boersema is editor-in-chief of the Dutch daily newspaper Trouw. Boersema became the first female editor-in-chief of Trouw this June. She has been working for Trouw for more than 25 years now, also as a Moscow correspondent, chief of the Verdieping, chief of the news section, and also as the deputy chief editor-in-chief, where she took responsibility for the editorial direction. And with Trouw, she wants to bring hopeful and clear journalism. And Sander van Hoorn is a Dutch political scientist and journalist for NOS. In the past, he was a correspondent for NOS in the EU, the Middle East, and the Northern Africa, Israel, and occupied territories. He reported on the 9/11 attacks, the Arab Spring, and the rise of Islamic State. And after the 7th of October, he traveled back to Israel, where he's currently reporting regularly on the war. Welcome, both of you. To start with, how do you both reflect on Amal's story and maybe also her message?
Well, I'm deeply impressed by your story. Thank you. You've been very open, and it is a heartbreaking story. I think no Dutch journalist ever experienced like living in a war zone and working in a war zone. Although Sander has worked in a war zone, I have in the past visited Afghanistan and Iraq, but it's not the same. I think nobody can experience, and you have tried, and I want to thank you for that. That's what I want to say first. Well, we are here to talk about how we report in Dutch media. So I can only reflect about what our newspaper brings, and I think the whole last year has been, in journalistic way, a very turbulent one. Like, we have many discussions about what is happening in the Middle East on the news floor, like between colleagues, but also about the difficulties of reporting. So I can take you along a little about what we have done. Is that what you?
Yes, maybe first also hear a short answer of Sander, how he reflects on Amal's story.
You said there's thousands of stories like yours. There's 2 million minus 45,000 stories like yours. And what still pains me is that I was one of the people, together with, of course, Nasra Habiballa, our correspondent, that wasn't allowed to enter Gaza. And I constantly realize that we do have stories from Gaza. We even have our own crews through our fixer, Amira, you may know her, that we can ask to make stories custom made. But it will never be the same as following you to your own house in the tents and telling your story the way you did just now. And that is, I think that's the policy. That's the exactly reason why Israel doesn't let us in, because those are the stories that really make an impact, like you told it. And it still hurts that I haven't been able to tell those stories because I was banned from entering Gaza.
And maybe before you take us along with...
as an embedded reporter?
No, I didn't try embed. Banned as just entering as I used to, through Errors Crossing, and then go my own way. No, of course.
Maybe before you take us along, I would wonder, for both of you, you're a journalist, you're editor-in-chief, so you are involved in discussions of publishing, what to publish, maybe what not. If you think about news on Gaza, what's the most difficult thing in this, if you look at last year?
I think one of the most difficult things is what Sander mentioned, that you don't have your own people going there. We also had people going there in the past. It was always possible, though difficult, and this last year it wasn't. So right now also we have people in Syria. A month ago we had people in Lebanon, in the south, but not in Gaza. West Bank, we did reporting. We have a correspondent there. But I think that's one of the difficulties.
And Amal, in her speech, she also mentioned, the use of words. We also saw an example of AP. You both must have these discussions with your editor-in-chief in the newsroom.
We are such a big organization, and one of the fights I've been waging since 2006, when I went to Israel-Palestine, is the fight against the word operation, because it's a military term, and even you used it once, I counted. But in my opinion, an operation is intrinsically good. You have a disease, you go to the hospital, you get an operation, and you feel better. But sometimes an operation is just an attack or a bombardment or a targeted killing. And if you doubt it, and that's what I'm trying to tell the news desk already for like 15 years, if you doubt which word to use, try to mirror it. Do you ever call a Hamas attack an operation? And there you go, there you have it. So we don't use.
Did you win this discussion?
I did, but I have to, it's a constant fight. Also, I basically put a ban on the use of the word IDF because it's the Israeli army, and if you use IDF, why not use IOF, Israeli Occupation Force? So it's a choice, and what I try to explain is that at least be aware that you choose. So yeah. But it's a constant fight, and after October 7th, or before, but even after October 7th, the debate also in the newsroom has become heated, of course, and I guess also at Trouw, because you have people that really identify with the Palestinian people, and you have people that really identify with the Israeli people. And you have those discussions, and there's got to be room for those discussions, but at the end of the day, you have to provide good journalism. So how do you separate? How do you manage that? And that's the job of our editor-in-chief. But yeah.
Wendelmoed, do you have an example of such a discussion which you had maybe with a reporter?
Yes, I think one of the first, which is connected to what you told, that don't see us as an entity, as something without a face. And we very early realized that. Especially after 7 October, you had Israeli faces, but you didn't have faces from Gaza, voices from Gaza. So we started a regularly article which is called Voices from Gaza, where we used our contacts from everything from acquaintances to NGOs and institutes to every time tell a little story from a person from Gaza. And till this time, this article keeps appearing regularly. It is also difficult to make what you described, like with the internet, to get into contact and hold the interview. But I think in journalism, it's very important to don't fall in the pitfall of one side being an entity or an army or a group, and the other side being a group of real people with real suffering. So I think that is a discussion we had in the beginning. And the other biggest discussion is something that we, last year already, we had a Palestinian professor who said this is evolving into a genocide. And those were interviews, and a newspaper in the Netherlands is, I think it's not the case with the broadcasting company, but we have an op-ed, like the opinion of the newspaper, in which we comment on things. So we had an op-ed in the autumn that what we see in Gaza is genocide. And I think that was a step we took. Also, the reporters on... there you see it. And I think also with our readers, we had a lot of readers who wanted this. We also have readers, as we are rooted in the tradition of a Christian newspaper. We have people who were being raised with Israel as the promised land. Also, these readers wrote to us about the suffering in Gaza. So, and this genocide word, I think it really matters that we started to use this word, and it is not something that immediately affects the reporting, like we order journalists to say, now you have to call it genocide. That's not the case. But we also heard back from the reporters that it sort of hindered them because they sort of wrote about they're withholding food, they're withholding water, they're destroying their houses. So if you add up, and we had all these experts telling us that this is happening, and genocide is not a moment, it's not only a verdict of a court, an international court, it's also a process. So that's why we did this, and I think after us, some other newspapers did it too. The Guardian did it, NRC, Vrij Nederland. So I think this is also something which was evolving, which is surrounded with many discussions. So we also have them all on the news floor. Like we have also 2 colleagues from Syria. Will also bring their war experience, and one of them has worked in Egypt and as a journalist. So they're bringing in their view, and I think that's also very important.
And of course, this is a discussion in Dutch media to use the word genocide or not. You decided to do so. Sander, the NOS doesn't. Why not?
I haven't been present at the latest discussion about that, but I guess because it's a legal term. And in the end, we make television, so our priority is to send the teams that we still, through our fixers, can send in Gaza to tell human stories. And for me also, like it's bad as it is, and I mean I don't feel the urge to label it or to and if you see a war crime being committed in front of your eyes, you can judge for yourself. I mean. So
you don't have certain criteria or something that could be as a turning point when you all decide.
If you take the legalistic approach for a genocide, intent is necessary. So I'm not a jurist, but you can discuss about that. War crimes is more evident. So I think we use those words. But yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important that you're on the ground. So this is a shift in that you show as a newspaper where you stand and what you see, but it's not something that you order to be in the reporting, and that's not the case in the NOS, but also not at Trouw. Yeah.
I want to show an example. Recently, a Dutch MP from the BBB party, our Farmer Citizens Movement, asked questions about NOS reporting on Israel and its military actions in Gaza and Lebanon.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yes, and it was about this report where Hezbollah leader Nasrallah, it says there, was called a charismatic man for some of his people. And so this BBB MP said she is concerned about the journalistic integrity and impartiality of government-funded media. So she said this in our parliament, and she wanted an investigation, which is quite rare in the Netherlands for a parliamentarian to bring this in. How do you view this? How do you view this news? Maybe because it's about the NOS.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people, friend of foe, can agree that he had a charismatic charm that made him popular, the man he was. So there's no judgment in the word charismatic in this respect, but it's also, of course, a matter of being in the eye of the beholder. And that's the problem with Israel-Palestine. It's the problem with the Middle East, that a lot of the things, the criticism that people have is telling more about the people that criticize you than about your reporting. I mean, it's not to make it easy, but, and also like...
I also maybe mean a politician saying this from the government and asking a question about
happened
this.
in my time as well. I mean, SGP has asked questions about my reporting because I was anti-Semitic. And when I came to Israel, Palestine in 2006, elderly people, and there's quite a few of you, might still know Connie Mus and Edo Rosenthal. Edo Rosenthal was the public broadcaster. He said, when I came there, like, okay, people have a bias and therefore think that you have got one. And it's true until this day. And Connie Mus, he was a little bit more down to earth. He said, welcome to the Middle East. You will be called anti-Semites no matter what you report. And also that holds true. So it hasn't really changed. It has become louder. It has become more direct through social media. But the fact that people watch it, what you do and write and report through their own bias, it's, I guess, it's not new.
Maybe I can add something, because I think this remark also fits in a broader problem we have right now with this government, which sees in one way they think government-funded media should report what they think is fit, which is a completely wrong understanding of free press, I think. I think we need publicly funded media. We aren't. But we also don't report what our bosses say, which some people think. So I think that's a worrying development, not only connected to the Gaza problem. That is that politicians, some politicians, I should say, not be generalizing, have low respect of free press and also do, like calling us tuig van de richel, scum of the street. What do you call it?
Something like scum of the street,
something like
yes.
that, which I think is a dangerous development for safety of journalists reporting also in the Dutch streets.
And also because the risk is that it leads to self-censorship, because if you're not cautious, you take into account what people may do or may think or politicians may do, and then you choose different words. So that is a new struggle that we shouldn't have, to stay sane, basically, and to resist those words that are being spoken.
You already mentioned social media. Amal mentioned the influencers, actually a new generation of journalists who also report online. How do you deal with this? Do you make use of these people?
I think we actually wrote an article, yeah, of course. I think social media and finding people for the voices from Gaza is very useful for us. So we do trust them when we speak to them. I think that's important. And so I think the social media in this war, I mean, you have been around longer in the Middle East, but that's something which is really big, like from the last 10 years, that in a war zone that you can get civilian reporting through social media. And that's also in Syria now, but it's, I think, well, maybe 10 years that is fully changed reporting from areas where you are not allowed to get in.
Yeah, and I mean, it's indispensable. It's one of the sources, because the people that I knew in Gaza, they all left, luckily. But there's nobody I can call directly anymore. So the chat groups, the Instagram posts, that is one source of information. Then, of course, you have the big news agencies. And then, of course, we still have the teams that we can ask to go somewhere, including all the problems of feeding the footage, getting somewhere. So sometimes it takes days to get like a custom-made story. But no, and what we do with social media, of course, and I guess Trouw as well, is by now we have a specialized open source intelligence department. So we try to verify the location, the time, and stuff like that. We do that with social media posts as well. And then, yeah, of course, you use it also on television or on social media ourselves.
Oh, I will go to the audience just in a couple of minutes. Just a second. Oh, yeah, no, I will come to you later. Just Wendelmoed.
Yeah, I think in the wording, maybe I can add that. Especially this last year, we've become very cautious about. We mentioned the sources, of course, but we've become cautious about saying that it's a fact already. So you did see in articles a lot more appearing like they say it's this or it's not verified, giving the background of the facts. And I think that's new, but it also is connected to that Israeli authorities we also don't trust in this account, really not this last year. So yeah, and on the number of victims, we follow, I think that's also the case with you, you follow Hamas authorities, which is also followed by UN and NGOs.
And even Israeli newspapers use that number, I mean, for crying out loud.
Yeah. I want to ask Amal to come back on stage. Okay. So yeah, do you want to react on what you heard?
I would like to react only in one thing. I want to ask you a question, and didn't you think that you have to establish or to have a team in Gaza from Gazan journalists to send you information, to send you materials? As I'm still doing now the same. Even I'm in Netherlands, I still have the team there where they did the story. They did everything there, and we are in touch together, and we send the material to the Times of London. Why didn't you have a team there in Gaza? Why didn't you think about this, to have a team of Gazan journalists to cover?
We do. Yeah. That's how we get the stories.
Yeah, you do?
We weren't based there ourselves, like our correspondents? Money. I mean, like it's always a choice. Do you, for example, stay in Ramallah or Nablus? Do you stay in Tel Aviv? Do you stay in Jerusalem? Or do you stay in Gaza? We cannot have it all. I mean, we're publicly funded, so we're happy to have one correspondent dedicated to Israel-Palestine, and she has to choose where to live. Do we regret not being in Gaza before October 7? Of course, now we do. But before that, you could easily travel in and out.
But now you have a journalist there that covered the news
Amira
there?
fled, but her teams are still operational. So now Bet Lahia, Bet Hanun is difficult.
Yeah,
but
sure.
even until recently, we could get stories from there. So we could ask, like, the way we tell stories is not like show the destruction and point a number, like 10 people were killed.
Yeah.
Now we try to find somebody that has a relative there and make like a human story. And that we can still do to an extent because of the danger they are facing, the logistics they are facing. But we do have teams there, yeah.
But you say it's more a thing of making choices and also money maybe on how big the team can be.
Yeah, I mean, if in an ideal world we would have 3 correspondents there. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really something good, and I appreciate it. I don't have any other add. Thank
I will
you so
go,
much.
maybe a last question to end on, and the discussion doesn't stop, you know, we can make like a whole series of these. Yes, Amal ended actually our conversation with a call also on solidarity from journalists. What can you mean in this, or how could this evolve? What do you think, to have more solidarity with journalists there?
I think that it's a call we should listen to. Yeah, and well, personally, we are involved in the Netherlands in Reporters Without Borders, but I think Gaza, they suffered a lot, as you say, the most. So I take it to heart.
And maybe after, I mean, now you know each other, so maybe you can also create something together in this. Like I said, the discussion doesn't end here, but we have to stop because of the time. I know it's a very intense topic, but we all invited you to listen to them, and we have a third round at the bar. You can keep on discussing or asking questions or being mad. I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you another time. I want to thank the speakers, Weldemoed Boersema, Sander van Hoorn, and of course Amal Helles. Give them all a warm applause. Thank you.